They accused me of stealing my grandmother's necklace, my own mother in front of everyone. I was dragged out of the house like a stranger, while my brother cried crocodile tears behind her. For years, I wandered through jobs, reputations shattered, name erased. But what they didn't know was that my grandmother whispered something into my ear before she died. A secret, a warning, a key. I kept it buried for 15 years. And now they're about to see the price of their lies, on live television. You ever wonder what betrayal looks like when it's perfectly executed? Stay. Watch. Don't blink. The Hamiltons were a polished facade in the glossy pages of Connecticut society magazines. Every Thanksgiving, they graced local headlines as the modern American dynasty. My mother, Eleanor Hamilton, ran charity galas. My father, Thomas, chaired panels at Ivy League universities. And Eli, my younger brother, was a rising entrepreneur with a golden heart, as quoted by one puff piece in Hartford Living. Me? I was the invisible one with a Harvard scholarship, the overachiever, too intense to photograph well. But behind the camera flashes and curated smiles was a hierarchy no journalist ever saw. I earned everything: grades, accolades, independence. Eli earned adoration. From the day he was born, he was our mother's sun and moon. "He just feels things deeper," she'd say whenever he lashed out. "He's an empath, Maddie. You should learn from him." When our grandmother Vivian was placed on hospice care, it was me who stayed at her side. Eli showed up once with takeout and a hangover. I held her hand through morphine dreams and dying confessions. On her final night, she pulled me close, her breath shallow, her fingers trembling as they reached into the drawer beside her bed. From it, she drew out a velvet box containing the family's black onyx necklace, an heirloom passed through 4 generations of Hamilton women. She pressed it into my palm. "Don't show them," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's not just jewelry, it's protection. There are things your mother never told you." My heart raced, but before I could ask what she meant, she closed her eyes for the last time. At the funeral 2 days later, I wore the necklace tucked beneath my collar. I hadn't told anyone she gave it to me. It didn't feel right, like speaking her final words out loud would break them. I was still trying to decipher what she meant, but I wouldn't get the chance. After the service, my mother called a family meeting in the drawing room. Her face was like stone. "Where's the necklace?" she asked. "What necklace?" I replied, not expecting anything more than awkward small talk. She slammed an empty velvet box on the table. "Your grandmother's, the onyx. Don't play dumb. It's gone." "I have it," I admitted cautiously. "She gave it to me." "You mean you stole it?" she snapped. "You disgusting, selfish brat." My chest caved. "She gave it to me the night she died." "And you expect us to believe that?" My father stood by the fireplace, his hands behind his back, his eyes fixed on the floor. He said nothing. "Check my drawer," I pleaded. "It's there." "No," she spat. "You already sold it. I found a withdrawal from your account. Thousands. You needed the cash, didn't you?" "I didn't." I blinked. "What account?" Eli stepped into the room, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Maddie, just tell the truth. It's not too late." His performance was Oscar-worthy. I turned to him, stunned. "You knew about this?" "I saw you take something from Grandma's room," he said. I didn't want to believe it. That's when I saw it. Barely there, a twitch in the corner of his lips. A smirk, so faint it was practically invisible. But I saw it. That was when I knew. They'd set me up. Within minutes, I was exiled. My parents told me to leave the house that same night. They offered no explanation to the guests, only that I was unstable and needed distance. My belongings were boxed before I could even find the words to argue. The necklace I never saw again. As I stepped onto the driveway with nothing but my keys and a suitcase, I turned once, just once, and caught Eli watching from the upstairs window. He smiled and pulled the curtain closed. If you were me at that moment, what would you have done? Fought back? Screamed the truth? Or swallowed it like I did and walked away with nothing? Because the truth wasn't just inconvenient to them, it was a threat. I didn't just lose my family that day. I lost everything tethered to them. Within a week, Harvard revoked my scholarship. The reason cited: serious concerns regarding character and financial integrity. My email to the admissions board went unanswered. Friends I had known for years began to ghost me. Some blocked me outright. Even Rachel, my freshman roommate and former best friend, left me a single message before vanishing. I don't know what's true anymore, but I can't afford to be dragged down. I spiraled. The upscale apartment I once rented on campus was replaced with a room above a Thai restaurant in downtown Boston. I worked double shifts as a waitress, serving people who looked past me like I was invisible. My nights blurred into exhaustion. I kept the tips in a jar labeled Justice, a joke that stopped being funny long ago. One rainy Thursday afternoon, a man in a worn tweed coat took a seat in my section. He ordered green tea, then stared at me too long to be casual. "You're Madeline Hamilton, aren't you?" he asked finally. My stomach clenched. "Not anymore." He gave a sad smile. "I knew your grandmother. Vivian mentored me in her early years. I'm Robert Sinclair, adjunct law professor at Suffolk." I forced a nod. "What can I get you?" "I read about your scholarship being revoked," he said. "That doesn't happen because of a rumor. Harvard doesn't move on gossip." I froze. The world slowed. He leaned in. "They only act if there's documented concern. Official statements, letters." That night, I broke into the university's student affairs portal using my old login. Most features were locked now, but one email, buried deep in my archived folder, slipped through the cracks. It was from the dean's office, dated 2 days after my grandmother's funeral. "An anonymous source," it began, "has provided evidence suggesting Ms. Hamilton engaged in the theft and illegal sale of heirloom jewelry, resulting in a substantial cash transaction. We urge caution in her continued association with the institution." The email attached a PDF, a formal letter. It was written in sharp, passive-aggressive legalese, and it was signed, though the name was redacted. The document metadata wasn't. Hidden in the file properties was a single name: Eleanor Hamilton. My mother had written it. My mother had sent it. I sat in the dark for an hour, staring at the screen, replaying every moment from that week. The outrage, the coldness, the silence from my father. It wasn't grief, it was strategy. The next day, I contacted every bank I had ever used. I requested credit reports, balance histories, and transaction logs. One response stood out: a dormant savings account opened in my name months before the funeral. I had never touched it, never even known it existed. But the transactions were current, weekly deposits of several $1,000s, each from a company owned by Eli. I confronted the bank, showed them my ID, claimed identity theft. They launched an investigation, but before anything came of it, I received an email. No sender. Just one line: "Withdraw this claim or face a defamation suit for impersonating yourself." The words made no sense at first. Then they did. My mother had opened the account under my name, my legal name, but the identity she assigned to it wasn't me. It was a version of me she controlled. On paper, I was involved in something dirty. On paper, I looked like a criminal. It was a laundering pipeline, and I was the puppet figurehead. That night, I typed a message to my mother. Subject: cease immediately. Body: I know about the account. I know about the documents. Stop, or I go public. Her reply came 2 minutes later. Try. You'll only prove us right. But it wasn't her words that shook me. It was what came after. A text message from Eli. You're still playing this like it's chess, but you don't even know the rules. I'm the endgame. You're already off the board. Then another. You were never the heir, Maddie. You were the placeholder. You just didn't know it. And the final nail. You've been erased. There's a specific kind of nausea that comes when reality feels staged. When you realize you were never just the daughter. They made you the scapegoat. Not by accident, not in panic, but by design. At that moment, I stopped wondering if my family had gone too far. I started wondering if they were ever a family at all. There was only one person left I thought I could trust. Ryan had been there when no one else was. He'd found me crying behind the Thai restaurant one night after a double shift, holding my breath just to stop the tears. He didn't ask questions. He just brought food, offered a couch, and gave me silence when I needed it. We fell into something quiet. Not quite love, but the closest I'd come to it in years. He told me he liked me because I didn't expect anything from him. I told him I liked him because he never asked about my past. It worked, until it didn't. I was looking for my USB drive one evening, a small black stick I kept in a tin with old receipts and loose keys. It had all my scanned documents, bank screenshots, even the email from Harvard with my mother's signature in the metadata. But it was gone. Panic flared. I tore the apartment apart. I hadn't moved it. I never did. Ryan came home mid-search. When I told him what was missing, his face tensed just for a second. "You probably misplaced it," he said. "You've been tired." His voice was steady, too steady. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked his phone. I didn't want to. I had sworn never to be that person, but a thread had unraveled and I couldn't stop pulling. What I found unraveled me. A hidden folder in his photo gallery. Dozens of videos. Me, brushing my teeth, sleeping, crying on the fire escape, reading emails, scrolling through bank apps. Every single moment I thought was mine was not. I gagged. My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. He stirred in bed, mumbled something, then went still again. I left that night. Left everything, wallet, keys, dignity. I just ran. The next morning, I sat on the floor of a 24-hour laundromat, knees pulled to my chest, the hum of washing machines drowning out the world. For the first time in years, I let it all out. The sobs were primal, not quiet or clean. My life wasn't broken, it was dismantled. Piece by people who should have loved me, by people I had trusted. My body stopped shaking long enough to pull out my phone. One saved file remained in my cloud drive, the last voicemail from my grandmother, left days before she died. I hit play, expecting comfort. Instead, I got confusion. Her voice, frail and slow. "It's not the necklace. It's what it guards. Sin, not beauty. Hold on to it. It's not your burden, Maddie, but you'll need it. One day." I listened to it 5 times. The phrasing gnawed at me. What did she mean? Not your burden. I took the next bus to my old neighborhood. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I needed answers. The Hamilton estate loomed like a shadow from a different life. I didn't go near the house. Instead, I slipped through the back gate and made my way to the garden shed, where my belongings had been dumped after my exile. Most had been stolen or weather destroyed, but a single moldy box remained, sealed with duct tape. Inside was the velvet pouch that once held the onyx necklace. The jewelry was gone, of course, but the pouch had a false bottom, and tucked beneath it was a scrap of parchment. Old, brittle, etched with the Hamilton family crest, and a strange symbol I didn't recognize. Something between a spiral and a serpent eating its own tail. I snapped a photo and ran. Back at the library, I spent hours scouring archives and genealogy databases. I searched through every foundation linked to my grandmother, every shell company my family had ever used. Finally, buried in probate records from 30 years ago, I found it. A trust fund, established by Vivian Hamilton, accessible only through symbolic authentication. The name of the heir? Not Eleanor, not Eli, not me, but someone named RMH. I blinked. My initials were MRH, Madeline Rose Hamilton. This name was reversed. No one in the family matched. No cousin, no aunt, no record at all. It was a ghost, or a hidden truth. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was digging. And the dirt was dark, because whoever RMH was, they were the key to everything. The initials haunted me. RMH. I printed the trust documents, laid them out like evidence in a courtroom, and stared at them until the letters blurred. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a typo. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide the name, but not well enough. I cross-checked birth records, adoption files, even hospital logs from the year Eli was born. And there it was, a sealed record tied to Eleanor Hamilton. No father listed, no match to Thomas Hamilton. My stomach dropped. Eli wasn't my father's son. He never had been. For 32 years, our family had lived a lie. No wonder I never saw any baby pictures of my mother pregnant. No wonder Eli looked nothing like us. She must have gotten pregnant during one of my father's long business trips, maybe even before their wedding. I needed confirmation. I tracked down a retired nurse listed in a blog from the local hospital's alumni archive. After some coaxing and a generous donation, she remembered Eleanor. "Very dramatic," the woman said. "Insisted on no father's name. Said it would ruin everything." I returned to the probate documents. The trust was assigned not to Eli, but to R.M.H., Rose Margaret Heller. Heller, my grandmother's maiden name. The baby was born under a false name. Later, the identity had been erased and overwritten. Eli Hamilton was a fabrication. I felt a cold rush through my spine. My mother had built an empire of illusion, and at the center was a boy who never belonged. Would you reveal this if it meant destroying not just your mother's life, but also your father's illusions, your family's name, the myth of who you all were? Because I did. I compiled everything: birth certificates, metadata, hospital transfers, trust fund details. Then I called 3 people: a civil rights attorney, an investigative journalist with a YouTube channel that pulled millions of views, and a hacker who called himself Whale Song and only responded in frog memes. We formed a quiet triangle of exposure. Then I pitched a concept to the journalist, a televised segment called Legacy Unmasked. It would pose as a conversation between estranged family members about inheritance and justice, just vague enough to pique interest, just sharp enough to trigger curiosity. I sent an official request to Eleanor, framed by the production company. "We are inviting prominent families to share intergenerational narratives of resilience. Your story stood out." She agreed. Of course she did. Vanity was her Achilles heel. Eli agreed too, probably hoping to restore his public image after recent rumors about financial mismanagement. They didn't know that sitting in the live audience would be Ryan, my former boyfriend and surveillance plant. He thought he'd come to see me fail. Also present? A man named Daniel Kerrigan. He was 61, wore a brown blazer with worn elbow patches, and had a very specific memory. He dated Eleanor Hamilton in 1994, Eli's birth year. He agreed to submit a DNA sample weeks earlier. The results? A 99.7% match. The show was structured with surgical precision. The host opened with generic questions about family legacies and heirlooms, drawing out nostalgia. My mother glowed, savoring the camera. Eli offered his rehearsed charm. I let them speak. Then the host turned to me. "Madeline, you were estranged for some time. Why return now?" I smiled. "Because I was told I never belonged," I said calmly. "But I think the truth is, neither did he." Gasps. The room shifted. I pulled out the sealed envelope. "This contains the real birth certificate of Eli Hamilton. Or should I say, Rose Heller." My mother paled. Eli blinked. The host tried to cut to commercial. Too late. The screen behind us lit up, courtesy of Whale Song, and displayed the document. Birth date. Mother's name. No father listed. Next slide, DNA test results. A chart linking Eli not to Thomas Hamilton, but to Daniel Kerrigan, now standing in row 4. My mother stood up. "You're deranged," she hissed. "None of this is real." The host turned to her. "Is this your signature on the hospital file, Mrs. Hamilton?" She froze. I leaned forward. "Mom, if it's not true, deny it now, in front of America." Silence. Eli looked around, chest rising and falling, trapped in a body that was never his. And then, quietly, from the 3rd row, my father stood. Thomas Hamilton, stiff and pale, walked out of the studio without saying a word. He didn't need to. The silence in the studio was absolute. Not the kind of silence that waits politely for an answer, but the kind that thunders through rib cages, that hangs in the throat like smoke after a blast. The host, frozen in his seat, cleared his throat and asked, "Mrs. Hamilton, perhaps you'd like to clarify who was meant to inherit the onyx necklace." My mother stood stiffly, jaw clenched, trembling with a rage that couldn't find a target. She began, voice cracking. "She wasn't supposed to—" "Who was it for?" the host pressed. And then, something broke. "It was never his," she snapped, her voice rising with every syllable. "He's not even Thomas's son. I did what I had to do." There it was. Every gasp, every flashbulb, every camera angle recorded it. Her confession. Not from guilt, not from remorse, but from panic and pride. The audience was frozen, stunned into disbelief. It was as if someone had punched the air out of the room. The Hamilton legacy, carefully cultivated for decades, had just crumbled in seconds. From the front row, Thomas stood slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. Instead, he removed his wedding ring, the platinum band with the family crest, and dropped it to the floor with a soft clang. He walked out of the room without a word. Behind him, the screen lit up again, this time showing the trust documents I had uncovered, the account transfers, the shell companies, all linking back to Eleanor and Eli. The laundering, the name manipulation, the financial web spun from lies. Eli sprang from his seat. "This is slander," he shouted. "You think you've won, Maddie? You've got nothing. You're just jealous." The screen changed once more. DNA match, 99.7%. Then a list of corporate sponsors and board members who had cut ties with his company as of that morning, preemptively, after the investigative journalist leaked a teaser trailer the night before. Eli stared at the screen. He looked older suddenly, smaller, like the costume no longer fit. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, security was escorting both him and Eleanor from the stage. They didn't resist, they didn't scream, they just vanished like the ending of a myth no one believed in anymore. The aftermath moved fast. Federal investigators reopened an old case tied to Eleanor's foundation, fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. The trust funds she'd funneled through my name triggered alarms the second I went public. My attorney filed an affidavit proving identity theft, and a judge froze all accounts associated with her. Eli's company collapsed within a week. His lead investor, his former partner, both romantically and professionally, held a press conference to denounce him and filed for a full audit. He tried to call me. Once. I didn't answer. Instead, I reclaimed what had always been mine. Not just legally, but spiritually. The Hamilton legacy had never belonged to them. It had been forged by women like my grandmother, whose pain was buried in velvet boxes, and whose truths were whispered at the edge of death. I worked with the courts to reassign the remaining assets of Vivian's estate. Her will had been tampered with, restructured without her knowledge by Eleanor's legal team during her final months. My lawyer restored it. Instead of hoarding what remained, I created something new, a foundation. The Silent Kin. Its mission was simple: support and shelter for children cast out by their own families. Every dime I inherited from Vivian went into the trust. Every item except one. The necklace. It arrived in a plain package a few days after the taping. No return address, no note, just velvet and stone. The onyx glinted under soft light, darker than memory, heavier than regret. I held it for a long time, not as a token of wealth or status, but as proof. Proof that the truth wins if you're willing to bleed for it. I wore it only once. To the launch gala of the foundation. When I stepped onto the stage to speak, I didn't talk about revenge. I didn't mention betrayal. I spoke about silence, how it warps us, hardens us, isolates us. And how, sometimes, breaking that silence is the most dangerous and necessary thing we'll ever do. The audience didn't applaud at first. They just stood there, listening, absorbing. And then, slowly, they clapped. Not for me, but for every person who had ever been erased and chose to come back anyway. 6 months after the reckoning, my face was on magazine covers again, but for reasons I could finally live with. No longer a disgraced heiress, no longer the daughter who stole. I was simply Madeline Hamilton, the woman who spoke the truth, no matter the cost. The TED Talk invitation came through a friend of the journalist who helped break my story. At first, I declined. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't healed. But one night, as I stood alone in the foyer of my new apartment, staring at the necklace resting in its velvet box, I realized something. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't hiding anymore. When I stepped onto the red circle on that stage, my palms were slick with sweat. The lights were blinding, but the room was quiet, expectant. I took a breath. "We like to believe," I began, "that danger comes from strangers, from outside, from dark alleys and distant wars. But the deepest wounds I carry weren't given to me by enemies. They were given to me by people who tucked me in at night." A few heads nodded. The people who hurt me most shared my blood, my name, my dinner table. My family didn't break me in a single act of cruelty. They broke me by teaching me I didn't exist unless they allowed me to. Pause. Then, "The one who destroys us is not a stranger, but our own flesh and blood." Gasps. Not from shock, but from recognition. I told them everything. The necklace, the lies, the rewriting of identity, the silence I swallowed for years, the day I stopped surviving and started speaking. By the end, the room stood, not in a burst of applause, but in a collective silence, reverent, affirming. And I closed with a question, not for pity, but for power. If you were born inside a gilded cage, ask yourself, who locked the door? And more importantly, who holds the key now? The video went viral. Within a week, thousands of messages poured into my inbox. Not praise, not fan mail, confessions. From men and women who'd been gaslit, erased, discarded by those they loved most. Their stories weren't mine, but the pain was the same. I responded to everyone. And I did something I had once sworn I'd never do again. I went back to the estate. It was in foreclosure. The garden had grown wild. Vines swallowed the brick. Windows were boarded. The Hamilton nameplate had been removed. I stood at the edge of the driveway. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Then I walked away. The Silent Kin Center opened 3 months later in an old schoolhouse near the river. We converted classrooms into counseling spaces, music rooms, writing workshops, a legal clinic, a crisis dormitory. We didn't advertise it as a shelter. We called it a beginning. Every wall was painted in warm earth tones. No surveillance cameras, no locked cabinets, just space to breathe. One afternoon, I walked past the music room and heard something off-key. A young girl, maybe 12, sat at the piano. Her hands were tense, eyes glassy. She played the same broken note over and over again. I knelt beside her. "What's the song?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I made it up." "It's yours, then." She blinked. "It doesn't sound right." "Maybe it's not supposed to yet." I reached into my pocket. I hadn't worn the necklace in months. It had become a symbol more than an accessory. But now it was something else. I placed it in her hand. Her eyes widened. "This used to be stolen," I said. "Now it's returned. Not to its owner, but to someone who needs it." She didn't ask why. She just closed her fist around it and nodded. Outside, the sun was setting. The light poured through stained glass, washing everything in amber and gold. I watched the girl return to the piano. She struck the same note. It still wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. And as I stood in that room filled with uneven music and quiet healing, I felt something loosen inside me. Not a letting go, a letting be. Fade out. I am not their daughter anymore. I am mine.